Alrighty, we have our first semi-final here. Tim Willoughby alongside Rein Leber and Mattia Rizzi on Grixis Death Shadow is up against Martin Muller on Storm. Now, Martin finished 5th in the Swiss. Rizzi, he finished first, which means that he is going to get to go first in this first game. And Modern is a format where winning the die roll is a big deal. Mattia Rizzi, that's the shape of things for him for this entire top 8. Kicking things off with a Cycled Street Wraith, going to 18 immediately, but getting to draw a card for his trouble. Early doors, I would guess that from Rizzi, we're expecting to see a little bit of discard here, trying to disrupt the plans of Martin Muller. Martin Muller's Storm deck does need critical mass of the right spells to be able to get things going.
And the early turns will basically be Martin Muller playing cards like Sleight of Hand and Serum Visions, whereas Mattia Rizzi is looking for as many discard spells as possible.
So Sleight of Hand kicks things off here, just fixing a little bit of what's going on in Martin Muller's hand. And it may be that Rizzi was a little slower to use his discard because he knows that early doors, one of the things that he wants to hit is one of the potent 2-drops that reduces the cost of spells, and this is the turn that he gets to do so to actually hit them. On turn 1, it wouldn't really have changed too much about what he was going to take. He might as well wait an extra turn and let Muller draw a card first.
Yeah, especially because he also has the Totskar just to put 2 more cards in the graveyard. Could actually see a very quick clock already with the turn 2 Tessiger. If he finds another land, it seems like he's only got 1 land.
And 1 land's enough for Tessiger in this spot. But he may want to kick things off with a discard spell. Nope. You know what? Exile my graveyard. Here is a 4/5 Tessiger. You're on a clock now, Martin Muller.
And that's just the power of Totskar. Totskar basically in this deck, sometimes just a Dark Ritual, which lets you draw a card for 1 blue mana. Pretty good deal you get out of that card when you're playing cards like Tessiger, the Banana King, and Gurmuk Angler.
So Martin Muller here, his game plan is going to be to get one of his cost-reducing creatures in play at some point and then use that to help him fuel just a flurry of spells, a storm if you will, in order to cast a big grape shot. For now, he's just playing and passing. Has a response to this Inquisition of Kozilek though. Martin Muller's list, a little bit unusual for some of the Storm lists that we've seen in the past. He has a main deck Simian Spirit Guide, which can potentially speed up his clock. A main deck Empty the Warrens, just in case he needs to go wide in Game 1. A couple of copies of Peer Through Depths as well, so that he can dig for cards that he likes and indeed potentially have an extra card to splice onto with his rituals. Now, a remand there on the discard spell from Mattia Rizzi, looking absolutely great because there isn't the second land for Rizzi. If it had worked out that he could have simply recast the discard spell, then all it would have meant was that Martin Muller was kind of cycling that remand. As things go, it's a little bit better than that. He's got the red mana on turn 3. Typically the Storm deck more concerned with getting blue mana than red. That's kind of where the sticking point can lie. And
already?
Yeah, Baral coming into play. And now here come the fireworks. Desperate Ritual, Storm count 2 now, generating 3 mana. Manamorphose means that he's now got 2 blue and 2 red mana. That's what those lands on the bottom of the screen are for, just so that we can keep track of mana visually. 4 Storm already. Now comes Gifts Ungiven. 3 mana floating after the Gifts Ungiven. Mattia Rizzi just double checking everything that's been cast thus far. And that the mana count is correct. So +2, 3, 4. Spending 3 of that. Yep. I believe it checks out.
And that's just the power of being able to run 4 copies of Baral together with 4 copies of Goblin Electromancer. The deck certainly got a lot better with that. As you see, with so many rituals, you basically need 1 copy in play. And it might already be lethal here.
Yeah,
for Martin.
Basically, the operative card that the Gifts Ungiven gets to be live, whether in hand or the graveyard, is Past in Flames. It means that one way or another, sooner or later, you're going to be casting all of the cards that the Gifts Ungiven has found, whether or not from your hand or your graveyard. And we see Martin Muller here initially building up Storm and mana by casting the spells in his hand. Now that he's got a well-stocked graveyard, he spends some of that mana to flash back past In Flames, and then his entire graveyard is active. Martin Muller shows the Grape Shot in hand, and that's enough for Mattia Rizzi. Bing, bang, boom, very quick there. Martin Muller takes game 1 from Mattia Rizzi in this, the semi-finals of Grand Prix Copenhagen.
And I think this game goes completely different if Mattia has that second land. He had Stubborn Denial already, had another Inquisition of Kozilek to get rid of that Baral. So kind of stuck on mana in game 1, but I'm sure he will put up a good fight in game 2 and maybe even 3.
We do play best of 3, so more magic from these two to come, along with our other quarterfinal. We'll be semi-final. Sorry, we'll be back soon enough, right after these messages. Hello and welcome back to these, the semi-finals here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Marlene Leber. And we're going to get a chance to look at the other semi-final that we've got going on, having already seen Martin Muller win game 1 against Mattia Rizzi. Christian Ortiz Ros here with Living End is up against Lantern Control, and we can see that there's already an Ensnaring Bridge in play. There's already a Leyline of the Void in play. Pithing Needle naming Deadshot Minotaur, and basically here, while Christian Ortiz Ros has plenty of creatures in play, he doesn't have a way of getting stuck in here, and pre-board he doesn't have a way of removing that Ensnaring Bridge, so he's drawing pretty thin here to win the game. And at this point, Kim Stroh just needs to continue to work his way through Christian Ortiz Ros' deck. One potential beacon of hope for Ortiz Ros might have been if Kim Stroh couldn't get all of the cards out of his hand. If he draws too many expensive spells like Ensnaring Bridge, that we can see there, then at some point Ensnaring Bridge might be able to allow a few creatures to attack. However, unfortunately for Christian Ortiz Ros, Kim Stroh now on 3 lands. He can cast any spell in his deck apart from a Leyline of the Void with 3 mana. And while there is 1 card in hand for Stroh, that not enough. And actually, Christian Ortiz Ros says, you know what? Let's go to sideboard, because at that point, I can actually interact here. Kim Stroh picking up the first game there with his Lantern Control deck over Christian Ortiz Ros.
Yeah, with just 1 Ensnaring Bridge, he still had a shot, hoping to draw Beast Within, for example. But with that second copy, he knew he needed running Beast Within, and with the bell already dinging, there was not too much of a chance of that happening.
So, players both sideboarding in all of our matches. We're potentially going to have a knockdown, drag-out fight here between Mattia Rizzi and Martin Muller after sideboarding. A few potential changes that each of these players can go for. I mean, After sideboarding, Mattia Rizzi, for example, has access to the likes of Nihil Spellbomb and Grafdigger's Cage. Both of these cards great against the A plan of Martin Muller, which is to be casting Casting Flames and do things involving the cards in graveyard. However, Martin Muller has the option to swerve that, if you will, by potentially going up to a full 4 Empty the Warrens after sideboarding. He's got 1 in the main deck. He can potentially bring in more. And the good thing about Empty the Warrens in this matchup is that it doesn't necessarily rely on him being able to keep one of his cost reducers in play. It doesn't necessarily rely on him having to generate a gigantic storm count. If he can get a storm count of 3, 4, 5 and then make a lot of goblins, that may be enough to give real problems for the Grixis Death Shadow deck.
Yeah, Grixis Death Shadow not really able to answer that apart from the single engineered explosive. Oh, he does also have a Is It Staticaster, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see these 2 cards come in. And Martin Muller definitely aware of that and keeping that in mind when deciding whether or not he goes for the Grape Shard or Empty the Warrens. Of course, when he's got lethal damage, he will always go for the Grape Shot, but maybe he's just a little bit storm short and decides, yeah, Empty the Warrens is the plan I want to go, and hoping not to face any of the 2 cards I just mentioned.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that's going to be happening in this match, which maybe would not have happened in the Swiss, is each of these players has had the opportunity to look at the other's deck list, and that will impact on the decision making that they go with. There's no opportunity for surprises beyond kind of mind games as to how much you change your deck between games 1 and game 2. They know the potential of what could be coming from the opponents. It's just a matter of whether or not that potential is realized.
Mattia Rizzi's Cyber is actually stocked with cards in this matchup. Also 2 Surgical Extractions and 2 Stubborn Denial. Let's take a look at what cards are coming out. I think the Colligan's commands are definitely coming out here in this matchup. Apart from that, Lightning Bolt I like. Terminate as a 2 mana answers to the creatures. Yeah, I'm not really sure if you want that. I think you prefer 3 Fatal Push and 2 Lightning Bolt as the answers. Maybe Terminate can come out as well. Another card that might get trimmed down is a Street Raid or 2.
It's interesting looking at this build of Storm versus historic builds of Storm, that if you're a deck like Mattia Rizzi's in the past, you might have said, I'm playing against a Pyromancer Ascension combo deck that's trying to storm out. You know what? Killing creatures isn't really what I want to be doing. Rizzi kind of has to keep in some amount of creature removal because one of Martin Muller's easiest paths to victory is sticking a Baral or a Goblin Electromancer and then just having the earth and everything on it.
Yeah, as we saw with the addition of 4 Baral in together with the 4 Goblin Electromancer, the deck kind of changed. It now more and more relies on its creatures to generate mana and to generate storm with that. So Lightning Bolts and Fatal Push pretty good in this particular matchup, as they're 1 mana answers to 2 mana creatures, so you actually gain a mana in the run.
So it looks like we may have seen a mulligan or 2 between these 2 players, but are these keepers that we have now? Hopefully so. Rizzi, of course, it's not just Martin Muller that's been on a World Magic Cup team. Both of these players have had considerable success at the World Magic Cup, where they each broke out. And Polluted Delta into Thoughtseize here for Mattia Rizzi. He's paying a hefty cost in terms of his life total, but now he's working with perfect information. Sees Baral, Goblin Electromancer, lots of lands, and a Manamorphose on the side of the Dane, Martin Muller.
Yeah, 4 lands is probably 1 too many. Between Goblin Electromancer, Baral, and Manamorphose, it's of course a decision that depends a lot on what you have in hand. If you have enough removal for the 2 creature spells, I'm pretty sure you just take the Manamorphose, as it's the only way that Martin Muller has to draw some cards in his hand. If you don't have answers to, or for example only 1 Fatal Push, then it might be correct to take one of the 2 creatures.
I mean, I guess that the good news for Rizzi, if he does have another discard spell, is that none of the cards that are in Martin Muller's hand are getting cast on the first turn. Baral goes to the bin, and it looks like another land was the pickup there for Martin Muller. Not what he was looking for. The Storm deck can very happily go off with 3 lands. It can sometimes go off with 2, but high water for the deck in terms of the number of lands it needs is maybe 3 or 4. By the time you get to turn 5, if you're still playing the game, then something slightly strange is going on. Flooded Strand there for Mattia Rizzi.
After Cyber, you don't mind having a couple of more lands, especially with the Empty the Warrens plan, instead of the when you're facing so much graveyard hate like Nihil Spell Bump. You cannot really count on the graveyard to generate you even more mana. So having like 3 or 4 lands is fine, but drawing that 5th land, I'm sure he's not too happy about. Doesn't have any Desperate Ravings in his deck to get rid of excess lands.
Yeah, there's so many different ways of drawing cards that you have to make a few choices when building Blue-Red Storm these days. Street Wraith, meaning that Mattia Rizzi drops to 12, draws a card. He is now at a point where he could potentially cast a Death Shadow, but I would imagine that in this early game he might just want to continue interacting. Another Thoughtseize in hand for him. Will he pull the trigger?
I think he might go for some Zombie Fish. No, he goes for Thoughtseize. Taking a look at the hand of Martin Muller, that's the same hand I saw before, +1 Steam Vents.
Alright, no cost reducers left. It's Manamorphose plus lands. This a pretty dire set of draws for Martin Muller thus far. Cracks the Polluted Delta at the end of turn here. I guess that's 1 fewer land that you can draw.
In a deck with so many cantrips, that actually ends up mattering quite a lot. In a deck where you just draw 1 card a turn, the difference is rather small. But once you start drawing so many cards with Sleight of Hand, with Manamorphose, having 2 or 3 lands less in your deck makes up quite a difference.
I guess the good news for Martin Muller, if he ends up on, for example, the Empty the Warrens plan, is Mattia Rizzi already on 10 life. The Death Shadow deck has to kind of work on lowering its life total where it can, and that means that not a particularly large storm count is needed to present lethal with only 1 set of swings. Thought Scour there from Rizzi. Tasigur and another Thought Scour go into the graveyard. Lots of cards in the graveyard now, such that if Mattia Rizzi does want to go down the Delve route, he's going to be able to do so and still leave maybe a few juicy targets for Snapcaster Mage later.
And Martin Muller not too far off Empty the Warrens. I mean, if he draws Gifts Ungiven in his next turn, he can actually just go for Gifts Ungiven together with the Ritual to find Empty the Warrens, for example, and put into play 8 or 10 tokens.
Strong temptation, of course. Mattia Rizzi understands where that could be going. He's got all kinds of things going on. There is an L Spellbomb in his hand here. He also has the option to potentially put a big threat on the board. That didn't work out so well for him last game. Gurmag Angler shuffle to the front here. The Zombie Fish on board. 5/5 for 7 mana normally, but you can replace some of that mana cost with cards in the graveyard, and that's exactly what Mattia Rizzi does. Follows up with a Nile Spellbomb, even has a Polluted Delta such that if he wants to pay the black mana as and when he sacrifices the Spellbomb, that will work out just fine. Steam Vents tapped from Martin Muller. Statement of intent there. He's got not a whole lot going on just yet. A few rituals. He's got the potential on future turns to make something happen, but right now, very much playing defensive, a little bit cagey, and just having to watch as Mattia Rizzi has everything happening.
At least he started drawing spells after the first land. Now has 2 rituals and a Manamorphose, so that means that Gifts Ungiven is very good at this point. Empty the Warren is very good. Even a Graveshot is already in range. Mattia Rizzi already down to 9, so doesn't need that much more Storm to kill his opponent.
Serum Visions for Rizzi here. Gets to draw a card and then scry 2. Sees a Collective Brutality and a land, leaving just the 1 on top. Gurmag Angler, a pretty hefty clock. The Black Tarmogoyf, though those two do not play nicely. It's Zombie Fish or no.
I think Mattia Rizzi's hand not too good. 2 lands and a Street Raid. Hey, he goes down to 7. But he did find a Collective Brutality on top, so maybe he goes for that one this turn around. I think he should keeping up one blue-black land. He could play a land first, no? I think I would have played a land first. The basic swamp. And then keep up one blue and black source just to make sure you represent stubborn denial. But instead he goes for collective brutality. I'm assuming he's going to go for option number 1 and option number 3. Target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, which has become quite relevant as he's already down to 7. And target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose an instant or sorcery, Metamorphose being the instant of choice.
Yeah, deciding not to shrink his own zombie fish. I think that we can all live with that, apart from perhaps Martin Muller, I suppose. The pick up another land for Martin Muller. Muller's deck only runs 18 lands in the main, 3 Line, 1 Mountain, 3 Delta, 4 Scalding Tarn, 4 Spabler Canal, 3 Steam Vents. And having also used fetch lands, he's got to be feeling like this is not the draw that he was looking for.
Mattia Rizzi actually empty-handed, so representing that stubborn denial was not going to work out anyway. And this way he does get to filter a little bit more, goes down to 8 in the process. Now on 4 mana, does have quite some good draws. I think cracking the Held Spellbomb is not necessary and opens you up to some more possibilities of dying, so I think I hold on to it and hope to finish the deal in 2 turns.
I mean, at the moment he knows that Martin Muller has very little in the way of pressure, and he always is going to have the option of cracking that Nihil Spellbomb in response to things as and when Martin Muller tries to get something going. For Muller, in many respects, he wants Rizzi to crack that Spellbomb as soon as possible, because at least that means that then Muller knows that the coast is comparatively clear. Muller dropping to 6 here as he activates his Polluted Delta to find another land.
Mattia could be tempted here, because if he finds another zombie fish or a Tessiger or a Dead Shadow, it lowers the clock by 1 turn, fastens the clock by 1 turn. On the other hand, Snapcaster Mage is already lethal because he can actually flashback Collective Brutality, and together with the attack from the zombie fish, that's 7 damage. So it's 4 plus maximum 2 or 3 cards. It's only 7 cards which actually make the clock faster, so I don't think it was worth the risk there.
Yeah, Snapcaster Mage just attacking on its own would of course also help with the race, but the zombie fish knocking Martin Muller down to 1. He is in check. He needs to deal with things right now. 8 points of damage to deal, which is not an unreasonable ask for a blue-red Storm deck. However, right now, Martin Muller has just not found anything, drawn so many lands in that game, and Mattia Rizzi manages to square things up. It's a game apiece between Rizzi and Muller in the semi-finals here at Prix Copenhagen. A little smile from Martin Muller. Yeah, that was not what I was aiming to do, and it's going to be a game 3 with Muller on the play between these 2 players. We're going to get a chance to look across at the other match that we have going on now. We'll jump across and see where things are at with Lantern Control versus Living End in just one moment. Here we go. Kim Stroh on just 3 life at this point, and Christian Ortiz Ruiz is happily swinging in here because there is no ensnaring bridge from Kim Stroh. It's so important for him to be able to prevent things from happening of that stripe. We can see that some ingot chewers have been removed with a surgical extraction, and that's a great play from Kim Stroh because the ingot chewers have plenty of targets in his deck. However, if he doesn't have an ensnaring bridge, he doesn't have much against the beatdowns that are coming from Living End.
We also see a Beast Within in the graveyard of Christian Ortiz Ruiz, so he might have already destroyed a copy of Ensnaring Bridge, or maybe a Pitting Needle that was naming one of his cycle cards. Now Kim Stroh having one final draw to find the answer to the beats.
Well, there's going to be no sweeps in these semi-finals. Both of our matches currently 1 game apiece, and how important do you think going to be on the play is for the deciding games in these 2 different matches, Moraine?
Well, in the store matchup, it's definitely very important. Being on the play, having like the turn advantage in basically a race is always important. In this matchup, Lantern Control against Living End, it's less important since the games tend to go longer, and having that extra draw is actually quite relevant as well. So I'd say Martin Muller definitely happy. In the other matchup, doesn't matter all that much.
Alrighty, these players reconsulting their sideboards. It's not with beyond the realm of possibility that little adjustments get made based on who's on the play or the draw, but also based on just what you've seen from your opponent's sideboard plan after game 2. I think one thing that I know I'm guilty of from time to time is I make a sideboard plan for game 2 and then I don't really adjust it too much going into the third game.
Yeah, it's definitely something to do. Even in limited, it's so important to sideboard, something a lot of people just don't do or don't do enough. When your deck is full of 3/2s, for example, in limited, and you're facing a deck full of 2/4s, then it might be a good idea to sideboard some of these out for some slower but bigger creatures. In this particular case, for example, Mattia Rizzi, should he have seen an Empty the Warrens, he might be tempted to bring in that Engineered Explosive if he has not already. On the other side, if Martin Muller would have seen an Engineered Explosive from Mattia Rizzi, maybe he would have cut down on these Empty the Warrens a little bit, just hoping to get there with Grape Shot.
As it was, at least in the Muller-Rizzi match, we didn't see too much of the other one in terms of its game 2. There wasn't really very much information to be gained for either player in terms of changes that had been made after sideboarding. Muller basically drew lands and a small number of main deck spells. Rizzi didn't need to do very much in order to win the game because of how poor Martin Muller's draw was. Mattia Rizzi doing the last double check, counting up to make sure that he does have 15 cards in his sideboard. It would be a very unfortunate time to get a game loss for presenting a 59 card deck, because that would be the end of your tournament.
Yeah, the end of your tournament, although still a pretty good tournament if you made it all the way to the semifinals of 1,800 players. I'm sure you're still more than happy once the disappointment goes away.
I mean, in principle, you can pick up game losses at any time in the tournament, but picking them up in the top 8, stinging all the more because you're so close at this point. The trophy's not literally on the table, but if it's not, it's, within grasping distance. Going to get a quick look in on the deciding game between Kim Stroh and Christian Ortiz-Ross while mulligans and shuffling and so on is happening in our other match. Early Lantern of Insight for Kim Stroh, so he is going to have almost perfect information about everything that's going on Christian Ortiz-Ross' side of the board, see almost all of his draws, and the only sort of missing pieces of that puzzle are going to be whatever is in Christian's hand. He has got an Ingot Chewer, that one an important one to have in hand early. We'll find out whether or not there's any discard from Kim Stroh soon enough. I don't know whether or not I'd be too keen on destroying a Lance of Insight just because I know that there are more potent threats to actually win the game, but the Lantern is definitely an important piece for Lantern control. Clue, it's in the name of the deck.
It makes you see all of the cards your opponent draws, and with that does let you control the draw steps from your opponent together with cards such as Ghoulcaller's Bell and Pixies of Pandemonium and Codex Shredder.
Looks like Christian has gone for the Ingot Chewer on Lantern of Insight, and of course that Ingot Chewer is now in the graveyard, meaning that future living ends, they'll bring it back, it gets to remove another artifact, and that's one of the ways that Christian Ortiz-Ross can fight.
And now we see Inquisition of Kozilek from Kim Stroh, revealing Horror of the Broken Hands, Ingot Chewer, and a Minotaur.
I'm actually a little intrigued at the Inquisition still being in Kim Stroh's deck after sideboarding, because the only cards that it can hit are those that cost 3 or less. So basically he's hoping to be able to snag a Cascader. Aside from that, there's, I guess, living ends, but you don't want to put them in, like, they're fine to leave in your opponent's hand. Pithing Needle now being named, so I guess that the Inquisition is giving him information as to what to name with that Pithing Needle. You can name a cycler and have it be uncyclable, if you will.
Yeah, but then there's still the second Ingot Chewer. Drawing 2 out of 3 Ingot Chewer is very, very important, of course. The best cyber card Christian Ortiz-Ross has. And they are now already in the graveyard for 1 living end should he draw one of the Cascade spells, so they will keep coming back unless they get exiled, as we saw last game with Surgical Extraction.
Again, naming the Deadshot Minotaur there. Consistency from Kim Stroh, and he knows that there is one in hand, so it's holding back a little bit of cycling from Ortiz-Ross. There's a Thoughtseize in hand. Let's see what that targets.
I'm a bit surprised that Christian didn't destroy the Pitting Needle, but I guess, yeah, he just holding on to his Ingot Chewer to destroy Ensnaring Bridge, which is the card that is the most problematic. But then again, when you have 2 in the graveyard, maybe you shouldn't be too worried about Ensnaring Bridge, because one day or another you're just going to draw the Living End, the Cascade spell into Living End.
Yeah, Living End now would be producing a lot of power on the board, also destroying a lot of artifacts. Pithing Needle again, the draw for Kim Stroh. Stroh working pretty much empty-handed here, just a card or 2 left in his hand.
And I'm guessing that Pitting Needle is gonna name Fulminator Mage. Since he's only on 3 lands, he wants to keep his 3 lands, especially the Inventor's Fair, actually very important, since he'll be able to search up a Ensnaring Bridge quite soon.
The other thing, of course, is that the Inventor's Fair will be gaining him life. He has enough artifacts in play now that Pseudo Metalcraft, I suppose, is active for the Kaladesh card. Collective Brutality on the top for Kim Stroh. So lots of ways of dealing with cards in hand and indeed killing off Fulminator Mage. Yeah, the fact that the second needle naming Fulminator Mage there, meaning that it simply got killed by the Collective Brutality rather than anything more fanciful.
And look at that. When you cannot cycle your Minotaurs, just play them. 3/4, 5 mana.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the moves that Living End occasionally employs. It's clearly not plan A. Casting these creatures costs a lot of mana, and the size for cost ratio is not especially exciting for most of them. But you know what? They're bigger than a lot of creatures that many decks run. You know, if you throw down one of these Minotaurs against, say, Dredge, a 3/4 rumbles quite nicely with everything that the Dredge deck has going on. Architects of Will on top of Christian Ortiz Raw's deck yet. And one thing that we've not seen from Kim Stroh yet, in addition to, of course, the Ensnaring Bridge that would kind of reinforce the lock, is any way of getting rid of cards on top of Christian Ortiz Raw's deck. Lots of discard, but not a whole lot else. Welding Jar, an interesting one, because it can put a regeneration shield on an important artifact.
Yeah, and actually works very well against Ingot Chewer. Even if there's multiples, you can just sacrifice. Oh no, it just regenerates. So it will regenerate to the first one, but to the second one, it will get destroyed. So that doesn't work. It's not the same as Indestructible.
Yeah, regeneration is sort of gradually being phased out in newer sets for Indestructible, because I think it's just a cleaner implementation of a similar idea. But in this instance, Welding Jar does just grant regeneration, and Horror of the Broken Lands is actually a great creature for Christian Ortiz Ross to have if he's just on a beatdown plan, because now, while he's cycling, that horror's getting bigger, and he's presenting a sizable clock at this point.
Yeah, 7 damage with every cycle 2 more. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 next turn already. Academy Runes, I think it's going to be too slow for Kim Stroh.
There you can see Horror of the Broken Lands. One of the big pickups for this Living End deck. Yes, it cycles for exactly black as opposed to Monstrous Carabid and so on that have a little bit more flexible cycling costs, but the upside is there.
Yeah, the upside of it being a 4/4 for 5 mana, which can block instead of the Carabid. And when you cycle another card, which is pretty good, for example, with Street Rate, it just grows and grows.
We've heard the other tables ready. We're going to give it a minute or two before we move back, just to see whether or not Christian Ortiz Ross can kind of finish this game off in the next turn or so. It seems like he's got a straightforward enough attacking force, and he can see, based on that Lantern of Insight, that there's not anything too exciting on the top of Kim Stroh's deck just yet.
Next turn, Kim does finally find that 5th land, so he can sacrifice his Inventor's Fair. The question is, will Christian Ortiz have 18 plus 1, because he will gain 1 life? Ooh, he's actually playing a second copy of Horror of the Broken Land. I think Kim Stroh needs to shuffle here, otherwise he's just dead.
There's 11 damage being threatened just on the board before you worry about any cycling. Could it be that Christian Ortiz Ross is able to take this match, Living End against Lantern Control, and he's presenting a lethal amount of damage before we even worry about the pump ability on that Horror of the Broken Lands?
Who needs Living End when you can just play straight up limited cards?
And why not? Yeah, Kim Stroh here has to sacrifice the Lantern. He's got to try and find something. Inquisition of Kozilek in hand is not the important card that he's looking for, because Threats already on the table for Christian Ortiz-Ross. A big shuffle here. You can see Mattia Rizzi just getting ready on the other table. We're going to wait on that match starting for just a second. Let's head back and just see, after the shuffle on the other game, exactly what the draw is. It's just a land. There's the handshake from Kim Stroh. Now we can jump across to the other match. Christian Ortiz-Ross living end, winning there against Lantern Control. Sorry, Lantern fans. Lantern may be love, but it's not life. Life is living end.
The light is dead. The light is out.
So early doors here. Mattia Rizzi has already had a fatal push to deal with the first Goblin Electromancer. One Electromancer down, plenty more cost reducers all ready to go. Baral, Chief for Compliance, already in Martin Muller's hand, alongside a Gifts Ungiven. He's got a few interesting ones to work with.
But only 3 cards left for Martin Muller, so he has been doing some mulliganing here in this match, at least once, might be even twice.
Yeah, not been great draws for Martin Muller in these post-sideboard games, it would appear. Thought Scout putting plenty more cards in Mattia Rizzi's graveyard.
Now a Baral. Can that one survive? Because he does have 2 copies of Gifts Ungiven, so once he gets going, he might have enough, but I see a lightning bolt in the hands of Mattia Rizzi. I don't think he's going to waste any more time killing that one. There we go.
Yeah, he had the Steam Vents, played it untapped so that he was able to cast that lightning bolt. And gets to cast Tasigur, and you know what? There's exactly 1 blue mana left, and exactly 1 blue mana is all he needs to be able to cast Stubborn Denial. With that 4-power Tasigur in play, his Stubborn Denials are a 1 mana negate. And very good against these combo decks.
And there we have Tasigur from Mattia Rizzi. 5 mana, 4/5. Wouldn't be too good of a deal, but with Delve being this kind of way to put creatures into play more cheaply, combined with a 1 mana counterspell for non-creature spells, it's just very powerful, given that the 4 power gives you Ferocious.
Sees here from Mattia Rizzi. He does not want anything to be happening on the other side of the table. Sees 2 copies of Gifts Ungiven, 1 Pyretic Ritual. Gifts Ungiven costs 4, and the second one is almost dead anyway. Pretty tempting for me here to take the Ritual, I think.
It depends. I mean, if Martin draws the 4th land, then he can back-to-back Gifts Ungiven, and then he can finally find himself a kill. So I think taking the second Gifts is not that bad. If you have 1 counter now, Martin Muller has pretty much nothing going on, and you will find something else to seal the deal, I think. So I think taking the Gifts Ungiven is not that bad.
I mean, there's a Snapcaster Mage in hand for Mattia Rizzi here as well, which means that when he gets to untap, he will have the opportunity, even if he has Stubborn Denialed something this turn, to do the exact same thing again the following turn.
Yeah, he still has a land trap to make, so he might actually go for it this turn already. Although he does have Stubborn Denial, as we mentioned, might be taking that option.
Martin Muller here in a really tough spot. He has not got very many cards to work with, and Storm is a deck built around getting critical mass of spells played all in 1 turn. Another Ritual to pick up, so he's got Pyretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, and a Gifts Ungiven in hand. Unfortunately for Martin Muller, he does need to navigate a sea of counterspells. 4 mana, enough to cast Stubborn Denial, Snapcaster Mage, Stubborn Denial.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough battle for Martin Muller. I think he needs the perfect draws. He could, like, Manamorphose into empty the Warrens. Might be the way to crawl back into this game, but it's certainly not looking too good, especially given that there's still the Stubborn Denial and the Snapcaster Mage. If it would be just the Snapcaster Mage or just the Stubborn Denial, I think there was a way out, but with both of them, it's going to be tough.
I guess that one of the interesting things about Empty the Warrens in this matchup is that it makes it a lot more difficult for Mattia Rizzi to time when he wants to use his Stubborn Denials. If he was playing against simply the Grape Shot, then once there's the choke point of something like a Gifts Ungiven or something like a Past in Flames, yeah, you just throw out your counterspell on that and you're good to go. When Empty the Warrens is in the mix, that's a different 4-mana spell that Storm is very, very good against counter magic, because just casting the spell means that you're going to get all of the extra copies. So there may be a temptation for Mattia Rizzi to play counter magic on an earlier ritual rather than waiting and potentially getting blown out by Empty the Warrens. Go-Mag Angler, the draw for Mattia Rizzi. I don't think he necessarily needs to get the Anglerfish down just yet, but there's certainly a temptation to do so.
Yeah, it seems like he's going for it. And by leaving the bolt, he actually has a 2-turn clock now and still Stubborn Denial up. So well played by Mattia Rizzi. 4 plus 5 is 9, plus 3 is 12. Exactly what the life totals are of Martin Muller. Let's see if he can actually find a kill this turn, or maybe Empty the Warrens, as we said. The only 2 cards that could save him here. He's not going to go for Gifts Ungiven in this turn, knowing that he needs to draw Empty the Warrens.
I mean, I think that he needs many things. Even if he draws an Empty the Warrens here, he needs Mattia Rizzi to choose to employ his counter magic in a way that allows him to get something good with Empty the Warrens, and I'm not sure that that's possible in this scenario. So Mattia Rizzi here, he's got 11 damage to deal. He has the option here of starting off with Inquisition of Kozilek just to make sure the coast is clear. Attacks in, Inquisition sees the hand from Martin Muller that is not going to do too much on this board. There's no remands to worry about or that sort of thing. Shows the Snapcaster Mage. That'll do the Lightning Bolt, and big reaction there from Mattia Rizzi, able to score 2 games to 1. He will be in our finals. Congratulations to Mattia Rizzi. Defeat Martin Muller 2 games to 1, and I think we got some finals on our hands. Do not go anywhere. Just after these adverts, we will have the finals of Grand Prix Copenhagen.